Good afternoon. Ann and I are here from a magical place we'd love you to reconnect to. Imagine a new revolution in learning based on an idea that was introduced 4 decades ago, Sesame Street. We all know that our nation is in a deep economic slump. Unfortunately, the news won't get better soon. We're facing a long-term threat of large economic proportions. Recall the disturbing facts that Chris and Tom Luce have shared during the course of the day. Half of all low-income children in the United States are dropping out of school because they lack basic skills and learning habits. 95% of inmates cannot read at the 4th grade reading level. And perhaps even more disturbingly for us here in South Florida is that over half of middle-class youth, our kids, say they are bored with school and are not completing college. We are a nation truly at risk. This afternoon, we'll propose a provocative way to address education gaps that threaten our economic and civic values. We have strong evidence that digital educational media, when well deployed, can address both the early reading slump that predicts school failure and promote the skills and competencies needed to reclaim America's innovation edge. You may be skeptical, but please hear us out.
Hi. I'd like to begin today by telling you a story about how educational media has influenced my family. In 1978, my mom arrived in Carlisle, Pennsylvania from Saigon, Vietnam. Her and my father had been separated at the end of the Vietnam War. And surely enough, 9 months later, almost exactly to the day, I was born. My parents were looking forward to taking advantage of all the opportunities their new home offered. And even though they had each only achieved a high school education, they quickly learned that in America, education was the key to ensuring my future. However, they were really concerned that they themselves had not yet mastered English, being new immigrants. And they were worried that I would be at a major disadvantage in school and beyond. Luckily, some furry friends came to their rescue. While my mom was flipping channels, she noticed a television show that had letters and numbers and seemed to be for kids, and her motherly instincts kicked in, and she made sure that anytime I was watching TV, I would be watching Sesame Street. Now, 30 years later, I can proudly say that I'm one of the millions of children that Oscar, Big Bird, Bert and Ernie have helped learn how to read. Today, my generation is now competing with my peers in my parents' home country. While other countries like China and India are making education the cornerstone of their innovation and growth strategies, American education remains at a standstill. As Tom Luce talked about earlier, we are performing in the middle of the pack compared to our international competitors. And we simply cannot afford to be performing in the middle of the pack. According to a study by McKinsey, they estimate that if we were able to raise the performance of low-income kids to match that of their middle-income counterparts, there would be a $670 billion growth in GDP. That's 5%. But today, the 3 R's are not enough. As Don Levy was talking about, children need more than just the 3 R's to succeed. They need 21st century skills that include collaboration, communication, and mastery of information technology skills such as computer programming. However, before we can get to these skills, we still need them to learn the basics and the foundation for learning all types of knowledge, literacy.
So even today, all of us know learning to read is fundamental. If children don't master the skill set that allows them to read well by the 4th grade, a trajectory of school failure and all those rotten outcomes that come from it are set forth in motion. 4th grade illiteracy rates directly correlate with a plethora of bad outcomes that are detailed on this chart. But tragically, we're stuck in wet cement. Our approach to addressing this crisis has not made any progress. Look at this flat line. We've spent over $75 billion since 1992 on addressing this fundamental problem of getting kids to be proficient readers by the fourth grade. We've trained teachers, we've lowered class sizes, we've launched community literacy campaigns, and I'm sure many of you have been a part of. We've supported numerous commercial products. I don't mean to be too critical, but folks, we're not getting the job done. We need a new plan.
As Neil Ferguson said yesterday, we need to innovate our way out of the slump, and that includes the fourth grade reading slump. New evidence from the Cooney Center and its peers in the digital media and learning space point to a lot of promise in the use of digital media to help children learn literacy as well as other knowledge such as science and math. We need to meet kids where they are, but first let's look at what kids are doing these days. As you might have already observed with your own grandchildren if you have them, children are spending more time with digital media than they are in school. A recent report by the Kaiser Family Foundation found that kids are spending 7.5 hours a day using media. If you take into account media multitasking, which is using more than a device at one time, they're using media for 10.5 hours. Almost all American teens report playing video games, and 9-year-olds spend about double the amount of time playing video games than they do when they're 6. So these trends are aging down. Additionally, the mobile revolution is reaching kids as well, with mobile devices constituting the fastest growing medium for kids. You might be thinking the solution is to get kids away from digital media with all this usage. But it's our philosophy that if digital media is becoming like oxygen to them and they're living and breathing it, then we should take advantage of the time when they are using this digital media to help them learn. It's perhaps no coincidence that the kids that are performing the lowest performers in school are often the heaviest media users. This is a chart from the Stanford University Life Center that maps out learning in one's lifetime. As you can see here, children only spend 18.5% learning in the classroom, and the rest of it happens outside of the classroom. So we need to rethink how we're using this informal learning time and convert some of it for the good while they're using media. Also, let's take a look at the bright spots when people are doing something right. We've learned that effort matters. Malcolm Gladwell estimates that in order to be an expert in one's field requires a devotion to one's craft for at least 10,000 hours. This is a young Bill Gates who clocked in over 10,000 hours computer programming on a supercomputer at the age of 13, and the Beatles, who rehearsed for at least 10,000 hours before hitting the big time. So we propose a new approach that bridges home and school for a 360-degree approach to learning. Research has shown that digital media can motivate kids to learn, getting them to spend more time on task by engaging them with interactivity. Digital media can also offer personalized learning experience for kids by tailoring content to their skill level and interests. It can also scaffold deep learning in context, which is critical for learning new vocabulary, by presenting information to kids in different modalities using audio, video, and interactive activity. It can also stimulate intergenerational play and learning, which we'll tell you more about later. But that's the concept of taking advantage of bonding moments between children and grandparents and parents in order to make them more teachable moments.
Here are two recent reports on research conducted by the Cooney Center. These reports demonstrate that newly developed digital media programs focused on using games and mobile devices can make a powerful difference. In these reports, which are available free of charge on our website, We found best practices from Beijing to Hillsborough County that are giving children a boost in their basic and 21st century skills. However, we were also disappointed to find that the US is lagging our international competitors in innovation with technology. While other nations like Great Britain, Finland, and South Korea have digital policies that integrate mobile and game technologies in their classrooms, many US schools are banning cell phones and games in fear that children will be distracted or just fool around. To show policymakers and educators the promise of our new approach, we're developing models and prototypes in our laboratory, 2 of which we believe have breakthrough potential.
How many of you have ever tried to carry on a telephone conversation with a preschooler? Raise your hand. For most people, it can be a pretty frustrating experience, as joyful as it is. But it's really important for them to make those connections with adults in order to foster their healthy development. So the Cooney Center, together with the Nokia Research Center, took a look at how new video conferencing technology can be blended with traditional book formats to allow parents and kids to read books over long distances with grandparents who live far away. Just so we know what the market potential is, how many of you would be interested in such a device? So the way this works is one book is with a child and parent, and the other book is with the grandparent. Prompted by Elmo and Maria, grandparents can literally and virtually turn the page with their grandchild and engage in a playful dialogue that supports literacy learning. Grandparents can help explain concepts and images in the book and be right there with them. It's not as good as reading with the child in your lap, but we're hoping that it might be almost as good. Here's another picture of the interface on the mobile device. In studies, we found that families that used the Family Story Place system had longer book reading experiences, and children were much more engaged compared to families that use normal video conferencing over Skype.
Okay, one more show of hands. Who here remembers the electric company? We've brought it back. The iconic literacy program that you watched or your children watched that introduced Bill Cosby, Morgan Freeman, Rita Moreno, hey you guys, is back. The goal is to reach the new digital generation of 6 to 9-year-old struggling readers. It's not your electric company, it's the digital generation's electric company, and if you get a chance to watch it, you'll know what I mean. It's fast, it's hip, it's totally cool. It blends what we call a 360-degree literacy experience, including the components that are shown here on the screen: television show, online and console games, mobile content, outreach programs to reach low-income families. Here we've displayed what we think is a real innovation for children, the first video sharing site designed to get struggling readers deeply involved in their own learning and their own digital participation. Because children in the primary years must make the transition, as we suggested before, from learning to read to a better understanding of difficult content, we're encouraging kids to develop their own stories. With the benefit of video clips, sounds, and a mashup tool that exist on this site, children are able to create, compare, and share their own stories, and to feel the power of being an accomplished video producer, a future Sony director, perhaps, which to a 7-year-old is totally cool. So where do the research and emerging best practices that we've described to you today lead? What can we do as a community starting tomorrow to make sure that children learn to read well and enter a pathway to success? We'd like to share 3 strategies that we believe are part of the digital promise. First, our country needs to invest a lot more than it does in research and development. We've spent tens of billions of dollars on reading intervention, smaller classes, Title I, with some, but not nearly enough payoff. It's time to demonstrate what's possible with well-integrated technologies, especially in the unprogrammed time outside of school. We suggest that we set aside a healthy chunk, perhaps 7% of all government funding, for privately managed public-private partnerships and university-based digital education R&D. Second, the digital media market for kids has grown enormously. If any of you guys have gone out and tried to buy toys or games, you've noticed the phenomenon. Last Christmas, 6 of the 10 top-selling toys for young children had a digital dimension. Over $700 million has been invested in what's called virtual worlds for children just over the past year and a half. Delightful as many of these toys and products are, and come on, who doesn't love talking to a talking Elmo? We need to do a much better job of creating incentives to raise the bar for producers. Let's make it a goal for at least 10% of all industry-backed products to produce research-tested educational value. Third, our educators need to join the digital age. Every major sector has begun to transform their practices to incorporate new technologies, but our schools are still locked in a time warp where the technologies children love are checked at the school door. In fairness, teachers cannot teach what they do not know, so we're working with leading experts to create a digital teacher corps, which will start in communities where early learning is most at risk. Here's my great-nephew, Tani. He just turned 1. Unlike Anne 30 years ago, he'll never know a life without digital media. Children like Tani are mobile kids. They're ready to learn, communicate, or play wherever they are, 24/7, 365 days a year. For Tani's generation, the stakes are higher than ever. If they don't learn both the basics and the new skills and competencies required to compete in a global age, our country will stand still while others soar ahead. Let's face it, we need Tani and his peers to help clean up our mess a little bit. 40 years ago, Sesame Street was born with one innovator, Joan Gans Cooney, who had a big idea that spread. We feel strongly, Ann and I, and our team at Sesame Workshop, that a similar innovation tailored to the digital age can lead to a new revolution in children's learning. Here is Joan, ready as always to make a big difference. Will you? Thanks so much for listening.